Yeah, this is rare where I've seen a movie twice that we're reviewing, but because of the mix up last week, it's been like at least a week and a half since I've seen it, so it's not fresh in my head, even though it's like it's a rare movie I've seen twice that we reviewed.
It should be fresh in my mind. I actually finished it about 25 minutes ago. So,
Okay, perfect, perfect.
but I
So
have seen it before though.
okay, so how do you pronounce that the lead actress's last name? Because I think I got it wrong last time.
It's Mary Woronov.
Woronov. Okay.
Yep.
She's like a cult icon type actress that I guess is part of like, the actors who were in horror movies and end up building a career off of like horror and cult movies. Because horror is the one genre where you can really do that, where you can just be in like a good movie, but because it's horror, you're gonna have these dedicated fans that are gonna watch anything
Mhm.
you're in as long as it's in that genre. And I think this was like, if not her first role, her first big role that brought her on the map.
Yeah, it's definitely an early role for her, but yeah, you're right. She's kind of a cult actress, very well known in the horror community, dark comedy stuff.
Yeah, I looked at her filmography: Death Race 2000, Eating Raoul, Night of the Comet, Warlock. I've seen all those movies. Eating Raoul had like such a big reputation. Like I think my sights were set a little too high for that one, so I didn't really like it. But Death Race 2000, that is a movie I just thought was awesome. It may be one of Stallone's best movies. I don't know if that says more about me or more about what I think of Stallone or what, but I just love that movie.
Yeah,
So.
Death Race 2000 is kind of fun. I reviewed that actually on my channel maybe a year or so ago. I think it was only the first time I'd ever seen it. Maybe I saw it years ago once already. But Night of the Comet I've also seen many times. Eating Raoul, I've only seen once or twice. It never really stuck out as me as a fantastic film, although it's definitely a cult film and people love it. But yeah, I'm probably feeling the same way you do. I don't have a desire to see it again, but I probably will at some point.
Mhm. Probably for review purposes. It's not really,
Perhaps.
otherwise, it's not really worth revisiting. So she had some strong words to say about this production. She says, "We were giving a weird script, and the director tried to spark it up. He tried to make it an artistic statement, but it didn't work. It didn't even make much sense. Most people couldn't understand what was going on, which is not good, particularly for a horror film." So when I read this, I'm like, was she reading my mind from like her like this is kind of like how I felt. It felt like this was I mean it's a very standard plot, but it felt like the execution was a little art house. And I think I've mentioned this before. Sometimes you can straddle the line between really bad and really artistic. And this is just like really bad and some art in there. I think we had this discussion before with other really bad movies we watched. But yeah, I felt like he was trying to do something, so this statement made sense. But this movie just felt like a mess to me.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you're gonna do an artsy type film, I think you gotta execute it well because if you don't, you're gonna lose your audience. And I'll admit with this one, I had to pull up Wikipedia just so I could follow along to make sure I knew exactly what was going on. I was like, okay, that's what happened. That's what happened. So
Yeah. Another cult icon they had in this was John Carradine. He's a
yeah.
favorite of mine because I watch a lot of old movies, not just new stuff, but I mean like old.
Hmm.
So he had a weird career where the first part of his career, he was in some of the greatest movies ever made. Stagecoach, Grapes of Wrath are two of my all-time favorites. And then he became like this B movie schlocky type guy, which we've talked about before. As you get older, you kind of fall into a different path in your career where you can just still make money off of stuff like that. But the one thing that stayed consistent with his early work and his late work was his monologuing. He's like one of the best monologuing actors ever. And I think I may have mentioned this. I found inspiration for a movie I did that was about 20 minutes shorter than I wanted it to be. And I didn't have any actors. I just had myself and a camera. So I did this really long monologue that just wouldn't end, just so I can hit the runtime I wanted. And
Hmm.
it's just like the first person that popped into my head was John Carradine, because I've seen so many Al Adamson movies, even like Frankenstein Island, where
Uh-huh.
he would just come
I've seen it.
on and just talk and talk and talk, and it's just like, fuck.
Frankenstein Island, I remember that I saw it once, but all I remember is him kind of over the just screaming, the power, the power, the power. That's the only thing I remember from that movie, other than it was really bad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I have a soft spot for him, but yeah, if you watch a lot of his movies, good or bad, he does tend to have some really interesting monologues. Sometimes they feel ad lib, sometimes they feel scripted, but they're interesting nonetheless, good or bad. Um, but yeah, I mean, it had a decent cast of like B movie actors or cult icon actors. Those two, Patrick O'Neill. I didn't think they made really good use of it because as much as I talk about John Carradine being like this great monologuer, he didn't talk in the movie. It's like
Nope.
you take the best thing he does and you like take it away from him. Like, what the hell is the point? And like another thing that you said you had to look in Wikipedia to follow the plot. uh Mary, she felt like the main character because she started off with the movie, but then it seemed like other people kind of like took over. The lawyer felt like a main character, but then he died, and it's like, okay, who are we following? The killer? He's maybe the main character, where we think the son is the killer or the main character. So it was just kind of like all over the place. It's like who the movie is focused on.
Yeah, and plus I was kind of confused by the fact it's, spoiler, the people that this guy is killing are people who are in the town that we've met already, John Carradine, the mayor. But they were allegedly part of a mental institution, but they seem pretty normal to me.
Yeah, yeah. The ideas that this movie presents has, you can argue like maybe they came up with some of these tropes that now we're embracing. The killer POV where he's going around killing people, we just see the weapon. You know, we definitely saw that in Halloween and subsequent slasher movies. The phone calls from the killer where he's warning people and he's calling them right before or after he does killings. The holiday theme, the edge weapon. He uses an axe in this. There's a lot of different things that's like, man, like these are interesting ideas. These are things we've seen after, but they weren't executed very well in here.
No, I don't think so. I'm going to give one little bit of a credit, though. The thing I thought that was executed best, I really enjoyed the soundtrack of this movie. And when I say soundtrack, I don't mean just the soundtrack. I mean sometimes the lack of soundtrack. To me, that when it just gets quiet and you hear the sounds of the house and the clock ticking, to me that sets an atmosphere that I really enjoy, especially in a horror movie like this. But even when you did hear the soundtrack, such as there was like some Christmas music playing, but they always play it in more of an ominous key. It's kind of a downer, almost like a scary Christmas song, even though it's a traditional Christmas song. I like that, so I really enjoyed that. That's the pretty much the only thing I enjoyed about this movie.
Hmm. They even had like this really attractive girl in there. I think she may have been like a playmate or a model at the time. And I'm gonna sound chauvinist. I'm gonna sound, really bad here, but you're a low budget B movie. You don't tease nudity. Mainstream movies tease nudity. You show nudity. And I was like, she's some nice eye candy. She's not much of an
Hmm.
actress. So you think you at least see some tits or something. We don't even get that, you know?
No, that was disappointing. I noticed. I know who exactly who you're talking about. I don't know. I don't recognize her name. Astrid Heeren is her name. I have no idea who she is. But no, I was hoping they would show something there, but not just a tease, like you said.
Yeah, she did like a few small roles. It seemed like modeling was her main thing, but yeah, I mean, yeah, disappointing, disappointing. And as you said, like the whole town was filled with people who escaped from an insane asylum. That's a great framework to have a bunch of crazy characters, but like you said, they all act normal. So it's just like, what's the point?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Were they? I guess they all could have been cured, but if they're gonna have, at least one of them could have been crazy, right? But no, they were.
Something. And you have
Yeah.
all the incest going on. It's like, again, the ideas are good. The incest, the insane asylum, all the techniques that we now view as tropes, but none of the execution was interesting or compelling in any kind of a way. to make me say like, hey, like this is enjoyable or this is worth recommending. Another thing I did read is that Andy Warhol, his clique, I
Yeah.
guess, they were all of the people in the insane asylum, like whoever like it was following him around at the time. The Warhol superstars or the Warhol factory, there are different names for them.
Yep.
But just all the hangers on for Andy Warhol were most of the people in the insane asylum flashback sequence. Again, that was interesting, but I mean, when I think Andy Warhol, I think crazy, over the top. The scenes were just boring, you know, sepia tone boredom. I can't recommend this movie at all.
No, again, like I said, the only thing I really liked was the soundtrack. The rest of the movie was just kind of slow, boring, and confusing. And if you don't have Wikipedia telling you what's happening.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say this, not to be too critical, the men in this movie have the faces for radio. So some cute girls, but these guys, man, they all look like they should be the killer in a movie. You know, it's like none of them seem like the hero or that's coming through. But yeah, very convoluted and not really fun. So this new segment we're going to add here is we're going to talk about a few movies that I've seen recently and that you've also seen, and just give our brief thoughts on them. The Uninvited is a movie that I thought was very interesting. It just feels like this like cheesy, campy movie, and then with this cat who comes out of a smaller cat comes out of his mouth, and the size of the cat ranges depending on the scene. Sometimes it feels like it's somebody in a suit, and then sometimes it feels like a hand puppet. It's just mind-boggling. Like somebody was on acid when they wrote it and made it.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
My final thought, then I'll let you go. My final thought is that I thought it was a pretty decent movie. I loved it when it suddenly out of nowhere got super bleak, and you know, characters are just committing suicide and they're blaming each other for whose fault it was. I'm like, when did this movie, like this fun little weird movie, get so effing dark, you know? So, but I loved it.
No, that's a crazy film. I only have that because the director of that movie, his name is Graydon Clark. He directed a lot of B movies, and he did one called Joysticks, which is one of my all-time favorite teen sex comedies from the 80s. And years ago, before it was available on Blu-ray, he was selling his own DVDs of it, I guess, from Facebook, and I bought it from him. He autographed it. He sent me some photos from the movie that he also autographed, but then he also threw in Uninvited for free, signed it, and sent it on. So that's the only reason I have this movie. And yeah, it's the only movie. I have a lot of killer animal movies, but this is the first killer kitty cat I had. So
yeah, I think we talked about like weird the 70s, like with the weird stuff going on with Kingdom of the Spiders. But yeah, a cat, I guess that falls into like non-threatening animals that are just like killers in horror movies for some reason. Don't Go in the House, the late 70s,
Ooh.
kind of like the Mother's Dead incel type son who is psychotic and goes out and kills people type psycho subgenre of horror movies. Haunted house, I guess, type horror movie. I thought this was interesting. It's a little bit psycho, and then a little bit I thought it was interesting that a flamethrower was his main weapon. Very over the top, very crazy. I thought the first half of this movie wasn't that interesting, but when they kind of like out of nowhere, like the character suddenly got creepy. He just came off like this flat, uninspired performance. But from the scene where he goes and buys a shirt and a suit, that interaction just felt so awkward. Almost wanted to look away in that scene where he's buying the suit because it just felt so awkward. I think from that point of the movie on, like he just got really creepy, and the movie just like took it up a notch. And then when he came out in that, that I don't know what you call that suit, where he's wearing to protect you from burning.
Is that a hazmat suit? I don't know, but
I don't know, whatever it's called.
A flame retardant suit? I don't know.
Yeah, when he came out in that suit and just like flamed the priest, I was like, "You win, movie, awesome." What do you think of that?
That every time I see that movie, I just think it's dirty and grim and just brutal. I would imagine that's the kind of film that women hate. This seeing not only is he burning her to death, he's kidnapping her, he's stripping her naked before he does it. So it's just exploitative in every way. Just a dirty, grim film, but I enjoy it. It's good trash.
Yeah. Another grim film that's also horror, but it's not trashy, and The Exorcist, the original Exorcist, the one that started all this exorcism type movies. I always, in my mind, when people talk about The Exorcist being like this real scary movie, I always viewed it partially as the popularity is also because you have this little girl cursing. And I just partially view it as a comedy. But I do see the seriousness in it. I don't necessarily find it scary, but I like the journey of the priest with his dead mother and coming to grips with that. Um, Max von Sydow, one of my all-time favorite actors. He's in a lot of Ingmar Bergman movies that are some of my favorites of all time when he was younger. So I thought the acting was great. It deserves its reputation as a great horror film. I'm just in that camp where I think it's partially a comedy and partially a horror.
Yeah, I did not get the comedy aspects of it. I don't find it scary either. But maybe in 1973 or whenever that was, people were not as jaded as they are today. I just found it very enjoyable. I don't know how much I buy into whether or not that kind of stuff can happen. I don't think I go down that road, but a lot of people do, and maybe that was part of the scares. I don't know.
Yeah, come on, Linda Blair spitting pea soup in their faces and saying "eat my cunt" and all. You don't find that funny? I do.
Well, yeah,
I'm sick
it's
puppy, I guess.
yeah. No, it's entertaining. I mean, it's something that when I was a kid, I would always repeat those lines because it's just so dirty.
Yeah, yeah. Christine from 2016. This is based on a true story of a woman, a news anchor who killed herself on live TV. If you look around, there is some footage that's supposedly snuff footage of her killing herself. You do hear some debate that it's all staged as well.
Right.
It does look pretty brutal, but
It
all
does.
indications that might be staged. It just depends on what camp you fall in. But the actual movie itself, I don't know how accurate it is because it's Hollywood, but I thought it was a pretty good performance by the lead actress, pretty compelling movie, and I think it did a fair job of portraying someone with mental illness, which is always tricky in film.
Yeah, I was familiar with the story. I didn't realize a movie had been made about it, and we just kind of stumbled upon it on, I don't know if it was Netflix or Amazon Prime. I've seen that footage also, the alleged real footage. I tend to lean towards that's probably fake. At least that's what everything I read about it. Everything I read said that the footage is not available and never will be, but it did look kind of real. But no, I enjoyed the movie too. I thought it was very well done.
Yeah. Speaking of like comedy and girls cursing in like horror movies, The Visitor. I thought this movie was hilarious and also perplexing and weird, odd. There's a lot of like um, legendary Hollywood names in there. Sam Peckinpah, director in there, cameo. John Huston, another famous director in there, was one of the lead roles. A battle of good and evil for this little girl. Again, she's doing the cursing stuff that comes off pretty funny to me, a la The Exorcist. This is
Yep.
another '70s movie. The Omen. You could think of it. Just like seems like a Carrie. It seems like it took a lot from a lot of the other horror movies that were going on around at the time and just kind of meshed it in there with this really artistic overtone. Odd movie, interesting. I would recommend it just for the oddity of it, not necessarily for the quality of it, and especially if you're into like like a lot of these older actors or older directors, to see all the names that actually said yes to doing this is pretty interesting.
This is a film I have to say that I had a complete 180 on. I saw this when I was a little kid. It used to show up on cable, and the big thing I always remembered is that little girl scream or swearing at that guy in the street. That's what stood out more than anything. But I remember,
I think it was Glenn Ford, and she was calling him a
yeah,
pedophile. Yeah.
yeah. Well, she even said, "Go fuck yourself" at one point, which was hilarious. But the version that I rented back in the 80s was and saw on cable was only 90 minutes long. And I remember watching that again in maybe the late 90s or so, and I was bored to death by it. However, the DVD has like 15 or 20 minutes of extra footage on it. And when I watched that maybe 3 years ago, I had a complete different take on it. I thought whatever they added, or I guess what they took out previously, really confused it. But when it was all put back together again, I loved it. I really enjoyed that movie much more than I thought I was going to. So yeah, that's a rare movie that I completely switched on. I like it, and I can't wait to see it again. Actually,
Yeah. And I would say all five of these movies, I would watch them 10 times over than watching the movie we actually reviewed.